So, who would have imagined in January 2020 that a virus so tiny that you can fit over 1,000 across the width of a human hair can bring the world to a stand in no time? When I first gave that talk just over 5 weeks ago, the coronavirus had infected over 120 million people, and unfortunately, more than 2.6 million people had passed away. Within the last 5 weeks, these numbers rose to over 137 million infections and unfortunately, nearly 3 million deaths. 4 out of 5 patients infected by the coronavirus will develop only mild symptoms like a fever or a cough. But 1 out of 5 patients will become so sick that they have to be admitted to hospital or even intensive care where they are put on machines to help them breathe. To put that into perspective, with an audience of 145 people tonight, 29 of you will become so sick that you have to be admitted to hospital for the severity of COVID. But besides all the lung problems that the patients show, COVID-19 is more than just a lung disease. Doctors all over the world have discovered that being admitted to hospital for COVID massively increases your risk of developing a blood clot, which is a blockage of blood flow in your body. In fact, 1 out of 3 patients in intensive care will develop a blood clot, and 1 out of 4 of those will unfortunately pass away because of that. My research looks into how blood clots form in COVID and how the formation can be prevented. But let me get back to the start. How do clots form? In order for clots to form, there are 2 systems that have to work together, namely platelet activation and coagulation. Coagulation is a very ordered series of reactions that result in the formation of a stable clot. However, this clot is mainly comprised of platelets, and this is the area I work on. Platelets are the key players and first responders to vessel injury and clot formation. Clot formation in your body is a natural process to heal an injured vessel. So when the vessels are intact, platelets circulate in your body in a sleeping state. However, if you, for example, cut yourself and start bleeding, the body sends alarm signals that wake the platelets up. The platelets then change their shape to develop little arms to hold onto the injured area and each other, and release signals that wake up further platelets, but just enough to seal the cut, but not the whole vessel. So the clot is just big enough to heal the injury. Once the injury is healed, your body removes the clot itself. However, there are many, many diseases where platelets become what is known as hyperactive, and they form massive clots in the brain, in the heart, or the lungs. And this is the underlying cause of well-known diseases such as stroke, heart attack, and pulmonary embolism. And in COVID, massive clots form in those organs as well. So I wanted to know, what is COVID doing to the platelets that makes them form all those clots in the organs? Therefore, during the first lockdown, I was working in the Mater Hospital to look at what COVID is doing to platelets. For that, I collected blood from patients who were hospitalized but had no COVID and compared their platelets to patients with COVID and really bad COVID. So the patients with really bad COVID had to be in intensive care and were on machines to help them breathe. I collected their blood and processed it to generate plasma and the platelets. And I first looked at the platelets. As I said, your body sends alarm signals to wake the platelets up when they're needed. In the lab, I can use a synthetic version of those wake-up signals to wake the platelets up. To then see how awake they are, I can look at the amount of the signals they release. And the first signal I looked at is called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP for short. And this works as follows. I take one of those plates and add the synthetic wake-up signal to the bottom, followed by the platelets that I had just prepared. And in order to see a reaction, I add a chemical that reacts with the ADP. And if you now turn off the light, you can see it glowing in the dark. and the brighter the glow, the more ADP has been released. I was absolutely fascinated by the results that I got. Platelets in COVID are so much more active compared to patients without COVID. In fact, they release 82 to 97 times more of the signals than regular platelets would do. Basically, COVID makes them cough up tons of platelets, spread it to way more platelets that are needed to seal the clot, that can result in the formation of massive clots and result in the patients dying from it. Because of the results I got, I then wondered, maybe the platelets in COVID are already awake. And in order to test for that, I looked at the plasma, because if the platelets are already awake in COVID, they would have released their signals to the plasma. So I specifically looked at another signal they released, namely platelet factor 4 or PF4, which is a signal they only release when they have been woken up before. So for this test, I again used one of those plates, and in this case added the plasma to it, followed by more chemicals. Here, my test doesn't glow in the end, but it will turn blue. And the darker the color, the more PF4 has been released, and the more awake the platelets are. And in fact, I found that platelets in COVID are twice as awake already. Therefore, I found out that platelets in COVID are never sleeping. But if the body then sends the alarm signals to wake the platelets up because there is an injury, they freak out, cough up tons of signals, spread it to way more platelets that are needed, that result in the formation of a massive clot and the blockage of blood flow. Luckily, we have medication or drugs such as aspirin to make the platelets more relaxed and stop coughing up so many signals, and basically follow the government's coughing guidelines on good coughing etiquette. And doctors all over the world use those drugs in massive clinical trials at the moment to find out if they are useful in preventing patients with COVID dying from heart attacks. So my next step is to find out for how long the platelets are so hyperactive. For that, I collected plasma from patients when they were actively sick with COVID and from weeks later when they were fine again, to then look at the plasma, the platelet signals that were released into the plasma to find out for how long the platelets are in this hyperactive state and for how long we have to treat the patients with the medication in order to prevent them from dying from clots. With that, I would like to thank my supervisor and the Extended Sphere Research Group and SFI for funding this important study. But my biggest thank you goes out to all of the patients who voluntarily participated in this study. And if you want to know more about our research, you can look at the website for the Institute for Discovery to look at our press release, and all the sciencey facts are published in our recent PLOS Biology paper. Thank you.